Hello, how was your Chinese New Year? Right, if you just had Chinese New Year. So yeah, it was pretty good for me. Alright, let's jump back in and let's talk about how we breathe. Okay, so in this part of the chapter, we're going to describe the process of breathing and the role of the diaphragm, ribs, and internal and external intercostal muscle. This is for pure science or pure biology. Okay, so have you ever seen an opera singer sing a very long note without pausing for breath? Do you wonder how they can take in so much air and control their breath? It's all due to highly trained muscles of their breathing mechanism. Yeah, breathing is an activity that involves muscles and it can be trained. So breathing is part of the gas exchange process. It refers to the muscular contractions and movements of the rib, which result in air moving in and out of the lungs. Humans possess special breathing mechanisms that increase the rate of gas exchange between the body and the external environment. The breathing movements essentially consist of two phases. The taking in of air called inhalation or inspiration, right? So that you breathe in, and the giving out of air called exhalation or expiration. Right? Some people say when you expire means you die. Okay, that another meaning is that when you expire means that you breathe out. Okay, so this is the thoracic cavity. Simple words, chest cavity. Now our chest is supported by our ribs, right? These are the bones that support our chest. In between each of the ribs, there are actually two sets of muscles, the external and internal intercostal muscles. These are antagonistic muscles. Okay, what's the meaning of antagonistic? Write this down. It means they work opposite of each other. When one contracts, the other will relax, and etc. Okay, so that's what they say here. When the external intercostal muscles contract, the internal intercostal muscles relax. Okay, so just remember, external is versus internal. External is opposite from internal. Let's look at a picture. So here we see the lungs surrounded by the rib cage. Okay, and all these ribs, right, have muscles in between of them. So you see this is the external intercostal muscle, and on the other behind it, right, would be the internal intercostal muscles. This is the lungs. Remember that in biological diagrams, you need to flip, right, according to your body. So this is the left lung, and this side will be the right lung. This is an X-ray showing the ribs and the lungs. Right, most of the time your lungs should be black. You should not be able to see any. You should be able to see through your lungs. That means it should be black on the X-ray. But when there are dots or spots on your lungs, that might indicate things like cancer or damage to your lungs. Okay, so when they say white lung, that's a bad sign. Okay, so alright, the thorax is separated from the abdomen by a dome-shaped sheet called the diaphragm. The diaphragm is made of muscle and elastic tissue. When the diaphragm muscles contract, the diaphragm flattens downward, and when they relax, the diaphragm arches upwards again. Okay, so this is your diaphragm. Normally it's a bit curved. So when it contracts, it will go down, flat, and then when it relaxes, it goes back up again. Okay, so these muscles, the intercostal muscles and the diaphragm, they change the volume of the thoracic cavity. And so in this case, volume is very important. Volume is what allows us to breathe and exhale. Okay, let's talk about inspiration or inhalation first. Yeah, just take note of this. So when you inspire, you breathe in, right? So you can try this also as I'm reading it. Try and feel it in your body. So when you breathe in, you will feel that your diaphragm muscles will contract and the diaphragm will flatten. The external intercostal muscles will contract whilst your internal intercostal muscles will relax. So this will cause your ribs to move upwards and out. Upwards and outwards. This also moves your sternum, which is the middle area of your rib cage, to move up and forward. Okay, so all of these will cause the volume of your thoracic cavity to increase. When the volume increases, it allows your lungs to expand, and the air pressure inside them will decrease. Okay, why? Because same amount of air, but the air can move further apart, so the pressure is lesser, right? So imagine you've got a balloon, a very small balloon, but you pump a lot of air into that small balloon, then the balloon will pop. But if you have a big balloon with the same amount of air, then there's lesser pressure in that balloon. Okay, so when the air pressure decreases, the volume increases. So now, because the air pressure in your lungs is low, the atmospheric pressure is higher. Okay, so atmospheric refers to the air around our body. Okay, so the air will breathe in, move into our lungs. Of course, you have to open your mouth and breathe, of course. Okay, so let's look at how it works. Okay, so we see that when the volume of the thorax increases, because the diaphragm is flattened and because the ribs and sternum are moving upwards. Okay, so this guy is facing this way. Okay, this is the spine, this is the front. Okay, so diaphragm goes down, ribs and sternum go up and forward. So there's more volume in the lungs, pressure drops, the air outside has higher pressure, so it can move into the lungs. Okay, so this is the front view of the rib cage. Remember, the sternum is the middle, the part that connects your two rib cages together, and the rib cage together, not two rib cage. Okay, and what we see here is just basically like you can think of it like a pail. Alright, so when a pail, you lift up the pail handle, right? It's similar to how you lift up the ribs because of the external intercostal muscles contracting. So when they contract, they pull it up, and the internal intercostal muscles will relax. So that will also allow it to move upwards. Okay. Okay, just a quick summary, right? How does the air enter the lungs? From the nostrils, through the nasal passages, through the pharynx, through the larynx, through the trachea, through the bronchi, through the bronchioles, into the alveoli. Okay, so here we can see a model of a diaphragm. So what we see is that there's this rubber sheet. Okay, of course, this model doesn't include the external and internal intercostal muscles, so it's just only half of it. So the diaphragm, right, if you pull it down, okay, let's say you have a bottle, right, that is completely airtight, right, and you have some balloons inside. When you have a rubber sheet at the bottom, you use the handle and you pull it down. This would increase the total volume in the bottle, that decreases the pressure of the balloons, and so air can actually move into the balloons, and that you will see the balloons increase in their volume by a little bit. Okay, so yeah. Okay, now let's talk about aspiration / exhalation, and after I'll teach you two very useful memory tools. Okay, when you expire, so when you breathe out, your diaphragm muscles relaxes and the diaphragm arches upwards again. Okay, so that you expire, you actually feel your body like shrink. It's because your diaphragm is going up and your lungs are shrinking a bit. So when the diaphragm relaxes and arches upwards, then the internal intercostal muscles will contract, whilst the external intercostal muscles will relax. So the ribs will move downwards and inwards, so back into your body, and the sternum will also move down to the original position. The volume of your thoracic cavity will decrease, and so your lungs will be compressed, and the air pressure inside them will increase as the volume decreases. Okay, so these two things, air pressure and volume, are always opposite of each other also. Like they are inversely proportional. When you got more volume, right, you have lesser pressure, but you got lesser volume with the same amount of matter, right, then the air pressure will increase. Okay, so the pressure within the lungs is now higher than the atmospheric pressure. The air is forced out of your lungs to the exterior environment. So when you're breathing out, you're actually contracting your lungs, you're forcing the pressure to go up so that the pressure of it will push the air out of your mouth. Okay, so here is an easy way to remember what happens to your intercostal muscle? Okay, these two words, rise and Eric. Rise stands for when you inhale, you rise. So when you inhale, when you inhale the rise, you are relaxing your internal intercostal muscles and contract your external intercostal muscles. Okay, let's try and remember that. When you inhale, you relax your internal intercostal muscles and contract your external intercostal muscles. That's rise. Opposite is Eric. When you exhale, your external intercostal muscles relax. Okay, so Eric, E stands for external intercostal muscles relax, and your internal intercostal muscles contract. Okay, let's try and remember that. Okay, Eric, when you exhale, your external intercostal muscles relax and your internal intercostal muscles contract. Okay, Eric. Okay, so that is a good memory tool that everybody should try and remember. Okay, let's look at the diagrams. So when you're exhaling, the first step is that your diaphragm would arch upwards. Then your intercostal muscles, right, will move so that your ribs will move down and your sternum will move down also. Right, this will cause the total volume inside the thorax to decrease. The pressure goes up, and therefore the pressure would force your air to go out of your lungs. Okay, same for this. Okay, just something interesting. You may have seen this in movies, when someone is not able to breathe on their own because their lungs are weakened, then they have to use this thing called a ventilator. Right? For COVID also affected, it damages people's lungs. So ventilators is in high demand because, yeah, patients were unable to breathe properly. Okay, so this is an important piece of technology that saved the life of many seriously ill patients. Okay, in fact, my friend's dad, he got COVID right at the start of the pandemic, so he was put on this. He almost died, but he survived because of this machine. Okay, so yeah, let's quickly talk about how inspired air differs from expired air. Okay, so inspired means you're breathing in, expired means you're breathing out. Inspired air differs in composition from expired air. Right, some water evaporates from the surface of the alveoli. This explains why the air we breathe out is saturated with water vapor. Okay, so you go to like cold country, and you can see the smoke, not smoke, but the water vapor, around your mouth. Okay, in the lungs, oxygen has been absorbed into the bloodstream, but carbon dioxide is released from the blood. This explains why the air we breathe out has a lower oxygen concentration, but a higher carbon dioxide concentration than the air we breathe in. Some heat also escapes from the blood into the alveolar air. Okay, so that's why your breath feels a bit hot. Okay, so let's look at the differences. Inspired air. Oxygen content is higher. Carbon dioxide content is lower. Nitrogen. Nitrogen is about 70% of the atmospheric air, right? Our body doesn't use nitrogen, so it doesn't, whatever goes in comes out. It doesn't matter. Then water vapor, it is variable but usually saturated. Rarely saturated, not usually. Okay, so it depends, right? Like in Singapore, when it's very rainy, there's a lot of water vapor in air, then yes, there's water vapor in air. But in other countries, when it's dry, you can actually feel the dryness of the air. So there's not much water vapor in the air that people breathe in most countries. But when you breathe out, right, there's a lot of little water vapor. These are the water vapor that came from your alveoli, that thin layer of moisture in the alveoli. That's why the expired air is saturated with water vapor. And also, lastly, the inspired air usually has a little bit of dust particles. Right? So when you're breathing air, maybe the dust from the road, from the cars, etc., they are in the air. But your body will then, the nostrils, the cilia of your trachea, the cilia inside the bronchi, they're all going to try and remove all this dust away from the air. So the air that we are breathing back out, it should have lesser or little dust particles. Okay, if you are breathing out dust particles, then it means that your cilia in your trachea is not working correctly or is stuck already. Okay, and the temperature for inspired air is whatever temperature is the room temperature or the temperature of the environment, and the expired air is about body temperature, 37 degrees Celsius. Okay, so this over here. Now take note that even though people say, you take in oxygen and you breathe out carbon dioxide, it's not 100%. That means you're not breathing in 100% oxygen and you're using it all, right? When you breathe in oxygen, the atmospheric oxygen is about 21%, right? But when you use it, your body will take about maybe 4 or 3% of it and you go into our bloodstream, and the rest will go out. So about maybe 17% of oxygen will still leave the body. It's not like we absorb every single molecule of oxygen into our blood. Okay. Okay. So blah blah blah. Okay, this is something we'll probably try in the lab. Okay, just give me a moment whilst it reloads. What has happened? Okay, so do you know that you can actually train yourself to breathe more or breathe deeper? Right, you can actually use this instrument called a spirometer, and this is an instrument used to measure the volume of air that enters and leaves the lungs during breathing. So in an experiment, a man was at rest for 1 minute and then exercised for 1 minute. How many breaths of air? Okay, so this is something that you can try. Okay, let's just watch a quick video of how to use a spirometer in case you ever need to.
An incentive spirometer is a device that helps you take slow, deep breaths. Using it correctly keeps the lungs working well and can help prevent problems like pneumonia. An incentive spirometer is made of hollow, clear plastic. It has a tube with a mouthpiece attached. Numbers on the spirometer show how deeply you breathe in. A little disc called a piston moves up and down. The area with arrows or lines on it shows a range. A ball goes up and down in this range to show how slowly you breathe in. Sit up straight and hold the spirometer in your hands. Take a deep breath in and let it out. Place the mouthpiece in your mouth. Make sure your lips completely cover the mouthpiece. Breathe in slowly through the mouthpiece, like sucking through a straw. Breathe slowly enough to keep the ball in your target zone, and breathe deeply enough until the piston gets to the mark your care team has set for you. Hold your breath for 3 seconds, then let it out slowly. It can take a few tries to hit your mark. Your care team will let you know how often to use the incentive spirometer.
Okay. So, yeah, that's called a spirometer. Okay, now we're going to talk about the last part of the chapter, which is actually quite an important part of the chapter also. This is commonly tested. So what effects does tobacco smoke have on human health? And the learning outcome: state the major toxic components of tobacco smoke, nicotine, tar, and carbon monoxide, and describe their effects on health. So maybe when about 100 years ago, right, cigarettes were just invented and they were very popular. So cigarette manufacturers would spend a huge amount of money for cigarette advertisements on media such as TV and billboards, and they paid powerful influencers such as celebrities to show how smoking was cool and trendy. Okay, let's take a look at that. It's like old cigarette advertisements. Okay, so they even managed to get physicians, right, get doctors to promote their products, cigarette products, and they say that okay, so yeah, all these old images showing how cool cigarette is, right? Okay, but nowadays you can't advertise cigarettes anymore. Why? What has changed? Okay, because as more and more medical evidence has emerged to show the harmful effects of smoking, and restrictions were imposed over the last 50 years, right, depending on various countries, And in Singapore, smoking is banned in most public spaces and forbidden for those under a certain age limit. Do you know what's the age limit? Okay, you shouldn't know. Okay, basically don't even bother, right? You shouldn't be going to go and find cigarettes anyway. Anyway, so instead of cigarette advertisement, we see a quit smoking campaign. Okay, so why is smoking bad? So first of all, where does tobacco come from? Okay, because a lot of people think that it's some product that comes out from the air or something. Tobacco is actually a plant. Okay, so tobacco plant, spelled wrongly. Okay, so it's actually grown in a plant like this, right? So like most plants, they are grown in a farm. They actually originated as slave labor, right? So in the past, in the US, right, they took slaves, to work on the farms, and one of the main products, right, besides cotton, was to actually work on this tobacco. So because they grew tobacco, right, this tobacco can then be sold, right, and they sell to people, they turn it into cigarettes, and in the past they'll call it cigars, not cigarettes, right? So they call it cigars. That's a bigger version, cigars. Okay, these were even worse because there's no filters or anything in them. So people would smoke these cigars and they think it'll be very cool, but at the point of time they don't have science, right? Or rather they are not that scientific to the point that they know what's bad for them, so they just do whatever they want. Okay, but after many years of research and many decades of evidence, right? Not just research, it's actually the evidence that's more important. You see that people who smoke tend to die young, they get lung cancer, they get heart problems, etc. Right? So scientists figure out why are these people dying early? It's because of cigarettes, because of the tobacco smoke also. Okay, so what's inside a single stick of cigarette? Okay, let's analyze a cigarette first. Cigarette. Okay, so inside a cigarette is consisting of three main parts. The first part is called the filter, right? This is where the person will put it into his mouth and hold it in his mouth. So they put filters, right? The idea of a filter is to try and reduce the amount of chemicals that enter in the body, but it's not really gonna work. You smoke, you open your mouth so big, sure going on. Okay, so anyway, and then here is the tobacco section, right? So the tobacco is basically what I told you about the plant. When they harvest the plant, they dry it, it becomes tobacco. Of course, this tobacco is added on with more chemicals to make it either maybe there's certain add on to the taste or make it hold it together, because it's not gonna stick together by itself, right? It needs to have certain components. And lastly, the ash component is where they light it up with their cigarette lighter. So inside a cigarette, right, we have these various parts. Okay, so this is the filter part. So there is different things. Okay, acids, various stuff. Okay, this one is toluene. Okay, this is especially dangerous. Carbon monoxide, that's what's released from the car exhaust engine. Nicotine, alright, this is actually an insecticide, but it's actually made by the plant itself. Okay, so the nicotine isn't added by the manufacturer, but nicotine is naturally found inside the plant. Okay, so inside the tobacco, there's nicotine. Okay, so why does a tobacco plant have nicotine? The tobacco plant, just like other plants, they actually are trying to prevent insects from eating them, right? So in order to prevent insects from eating them, the tobacco plant naturally produces this anti-insect thing, right? Called an insecticide, meant to kill insects so that insects don't come and attack them. And so when you consume a tobacco plant, you are consuming nicotine also, because this is part of the plant itself. And nicotine, besides being an insecticide, is also addictive to humans. So weird, right? It kills insects, but it becomes addictive to humans. At the same time, it also still damages humans. So there's a lot of different problems that was created by this. Okay, so let's talk about nicotine. What does nicotine do to the body? Firstly, it increases the heartbeat rate and blood pressure. So when you smoke, you'll start to feel like, oh, the heart feels more, it's like beating faster and faster. Okay, and then your blood pressure increases also, because when you beat faster, your blood pressure also increase. It will also increase the risk of blood clots in the arteries, which will lead to an increased risk of coronary heart disease. Okay, so why? Because when remember how we learned about when the blood pressure increases, there's more blood flow, the fats and the lipids are transported around the blood, there's more lipids being deposited into the plaques, right, that are formed in the heart, and so this will increase the risk of coronary heart disease. Okay, it also will cause the arteries to narrow, or increase the risk of arteries to narrow. And in a pregnant mother, narrow arteries will decrease the amount of food substances reaching the fetus, thereby affecting the fetal development and may cause miscarriage. Okay, so a mother is connected to the child by the umbilical cord, right? It's actually a big artery, right? Through the artery, food, nutrients, oxygen, everything is transported. You can imagine what happens if the artery is blocked or clogged up by the plaques, right? Then the baby will die. Okay, also, when a cigarette is lighted up, the components inside would start to combust, and through combustion, carbon monoxide is released. So carbon monoxide, it will reduce the ability of blood to transport oxygen, as carbon monoxide binds permanently to hemoglobin. Thus, there will be less hemoglobin available to transport oxygen. In a pregnant mother, less oxygen reaches the fetus through the placenta, which may affect fetal development. It also increases the risk of coronary heart disease. Thirdly, cigarettes contain tar. Tar is the same substance that are used to build roads. Okay, so these kind of substances, it's commonly used to build roads. It's very sticky substance, right? So like when a car is driving, what you're driving on is basically tar with other things. So this sticky substance, right, it will stick onto the cells. And when it sticks onto the cells, it causes the cells to become cancerous. So this tar increases the risk of cancer in the lungs, as tar can cause uncontrolled cell division. And so remember in chapter 1, we learned that the nucleus is the thing that controls cell division. So your cells don't always want to divide. There's always they want to maintain a correct amount of cells. So let's say, like in your skin cells, there's a certain amount of cells overall that we need to have. But if it starts to divide uncontrollably, then there's too many cells, and the cells are bad also. They are not normal cells, so they are what I call as cancer cells. Okay, tar also increases the risk of chronic bronchitis and emphysema. Okay, we're going to talk about these two diseases later. These two diseases are linked to the cilia inside our air passages, right? So inside the trachea, inside our bronchioles, there's this hair structures called the cilia. So if you can imagine, if you put something sticky on the hair, right, the cilia, it will get paralyzed. And so dust particles will be trapped in the mucous lining and cannot be removed. So basically, right, your cilia is useless, and then whatever dust, it continues to get trapped and trapped and trapped. You can imagine after a few years, right, the amount of dust that actually gets trapped inside is like, it's going to get clogged up. Okay, so let's talk about these two diseases. Frequent exposure to tobacco smoke increases the risk of a person getting diseases of the respiratory system, such as chronic bronchitis, emphysema, and lung cancer. Okay, for 3 diseases. Now, chronic bronchitis is due to a prolonged exposure to irritant particles that are found in tobacco smoke, can cause chronic bronchitis. The word chronic means it's always happening, or it's forever there. That's the meaning of chronic. Bronchitis is the word bronchioles, right? Remember the word bronchioles? So it's something to do with your bronchioles. Bronchi and bronchioles. Okay, so in chronic bronchitis, the epithelium lining of the air passages, for example, the bronchi, becomes inflamed. Inflamed means that the cells inside are there's something happening to the cells, right? So usually it's like dying or something, so that's why it's getting inflamed. Okay, not really that there's a fire or something in your body. Okay, inflamed just means like there's how does it mean? Yeah, there's some bad things happening there. Okay, so excessive mucus will be secreted by the epithelium. Okay, recall how we learned that in the lining of our air passages, right? There's this thing called the epithelial cells. This can actually secrete mucus to help trap bacteria and that kind of stuff. The cilia on the epithelium are also paralyzed. Mucus and dust particles cannot be removed. Okay, so normally when you cough, you can feel like all the things inside, and then you'll move it out, right? But this person is not able to, so they're forced to keep using, like, pressing their lungs, like pushing, trying to remove things, but they can't. So the air passages become blocked, making breathing difficult. And in order to breathe, persistent coughing occurs to clear the air passages. This increases the risk of getting lung infections. Now, coughing by itself is normal, right? We all cough sometimes. But if you continuously cough, coughing is actually quite a violent, it's quite damaging to our body. Okay, so which is why you shouldn't cough so like loudly, everything. The act of coughing can actually damage your lungs. Okay, so this disease over here, chronic bronchitis, can lead to another disease called emphysema. Because persistent and violent coughing due to bronchitis can lead to emphysema. In emphysema, the partition walls between the alveoli break down due to persistent and violent coughing. So you can see here, this is a healthy lung. In a healthy lung, each of the alveoli have their own space. Right? So this is 1 alveoli, 2 alveoli, 3 alveoli, 5 alveoli here. But in a damaged lung, you keep coughing, these walls actually become damaged and they merge together. Once they merge together, this whole thing becomes like one big alveoli. And you say, oh, big alveoli is good, right? No, it's not good. Because why? The surface area is lessened. Okay, so you see, this results in a decreased surface area for gaseous exchange. The lungs also lose their elasticity and become inflated with air. Breathing becomes difficult, and wheezing and severe breathlessness result. Okay, so remember what we learned about volume. When there is a larger volume, the pressure decreases, right? So in this case, the volume here increases, right? The volume increases, yet the surface area goes down. That's bad. But also the volume increases, it allows the air to stay inside the lungs. So you don't want that. You want the air to constantly go in and out, right? If not, you don't get fresh air. So if the air is continuously staying in the lungs, then the air is like stale. You'll never be able to get more oxygen, right? The kind of air that you are using is all very low in oxygen air. Okay, so finally, when a person has chronic bronchitis and emphysema, he is said to suffer from chronic obstructive lung disease. Okay, so this is like the worst stage already. So usually diseases happen in like stages, right? There's like, the first stage, second stage, and third stage. And this is kind of like the third stage. Okay. Then let's also talk about lung cancer. So as I said before, our lungs should normally be pink and they should look healthy. If you start to see that a lung is looking black and charred like this, you know that there's some damage already. There's definitely something wrong. So studies have shown that the risk of lung cancer increases when a person smokes tobacco. Okay, this shows a lung of a smoker compared to a pair of healthy lungs. According to the Singapore Health Promotion Board, smoking-related diseases in Singapore alone account for about 7 premature deaths each day. Okay, so imagine that, last time we were very scared of COVID. They say, oh, wow, every day got 1 person die, 2 person die, 3 person die. But this, this lung cancer is causing 7 people to die each day. Okay, what is cancer? Please highlight this. Cancer is the uncontrolled division of cells producing outgrowths or lumps of tissues. Apart from lung cancer, smoking also increases the risk of cancer in the mouth, throat, pancreas, kidney, and urinary bladder. Okay, so basically the whole body is affected. Okay, so if you look carefully, you see that all these black patches, right? These are actually cancerous patches. Why? Because when one cell, normally a cell doesn't divide until it's told to. But when these cells get cancer, they start dividing crazy, like crazy. And so they will just divide anyhow, and they will start to form little bumps, little spots here and there, and that's why it causes cancer. It's a bunch of uncontrolled cells. Okay, so let's map up to this chapter on respiration. Okay, what is respiration? Respiration involves the breakdown of food molecules to release energy. It occurs in living cells and involves enzymes. There are 2 types: aerobic respiration, where the equation is glucose plus oxygen is equals to carbon dioxide plus water plus large amount of energy. Then oxygen is required for this, blah 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 blah. Okay, anaerobic respiration is glucose, lactic acid plus small amount of energy. Okay, then talk about aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration is supported by breathing mechanisms. In humans, there's inspiration, there's expiration. Remember the two Eric and Rice. Okay, so remember using these two Eric and Rice can already solve it. Okay, then gas exchange is inside the alveoli, the capillaries. Right, there's a film of moisture covering the alveolar wall. Dissolved oxygen diffuses into the blood capillaries. Carbon dioxide diffuses from the blood into the alveolar capillaries. Okay, then lastly, talk about tobacco smoke. Tobacco smoke contains three things: nicotine, carbon monoxide, and tar. And this will increase the risk of chronic bronchitis, emphysema, and lung cancer. Okay, and we are done with the chapter. Okay, please do all of these practice questions as I try here. And on the next page also. Okay, do all these review questions. And then hopefully we will be able to continue the next chapter when I see you. Okay, peace out. Bye.